and welcome to the 2024 British Science Week live lesson with Connected Falkirk and STEM Falkirk. This is the pre-recorded version of the live lesson for this year, so there's going to be some small changes compared to what happens live on the morning, but we'll let you know those as we go through, and hopefully you'll still be able to take part fully. So the first thing we'd like you to do is scan the QR code that's on the screen here to have a look at our starter. So because this year's theme is time, we want you to have a look at your life stats individually or as a class to discuss the information. So if you scan the QR code just now, and then I'll show you the website and a few of the things about it. So when you open up this website, you're going to be faced with this page here. And what you want to do is put in your date of birth. Now, if you're doing this on the one-to-one iPads, everyone can do it. If you are doing it as a group, you might have to just choose a birthday or an example of a birthday that's near everyone else's. If you're doing it as a class, you might want to do your teacher's birthday, or you can just, again, choose a random example. Make sure that you get it the right way around because the month is first, then the date, just because it's an American kind of setup for it. And then when you're done, you can hit go. And then that's going to give you lots of information and stats about your life. And there's some really, really cool ones in here, all the way from how many times you've probably blinked to how far you've travelled around the solar system. So have a wee look through, have a wee discussion with maybe the person next to you or your class. And then when you're ready, come back to the video. So you want to pause the video here. And then when you're ready as a class to carry on, come back and hit play. Okay, so today's session is called Mouldy Marvels and Microbes, and we're really, really excited that you are watching this, hopefully with your class, to try this out this British Science Week. So just a quick introduction, my name is Lauren, I'm an Education Support Officer with Falkirk Council, and I currently also work with the STEM across the council as well at the moment. Now for the actual live lesson for British Science Week, I was joined by Roz and Cameron, who are both part of the STEM outreach team at Forth Valley College, and they helped to design this lesson and put it together. However, unfortunately, they aren't available for the pre-recorded version of the lesson, so unfortunately you've just got me for this one. So all three of us have science backgrounds, and here is our AI stickers that we've created to show you what particular bits of science are our favourites. Pause the video here and see if you can guess what they are. So you've probably guessed right with Roz. Roz is an ecologist, did her PhD in ecology, so she is interested in living things and biodiversity. For myself, I did my dissertation on viruses, so I've got me at a lab desk there, surrounded by lots of little viruses. And for Cameron, he has a similar background to mine. He really enjoys microbiology as well, so things like viruses, bacteria, etc., which is going to put us in good stead for our live lesson today. So now the three of us have introduced ourselves, we're going to introduce you to some exciting science activities, and this is going to be a really hands-on session, so please make sure you have your iPads on your desk ready to go. Now we're hoping you've already been doing lots of fun science activities over the last week or so for British Science Week, and to help we've put together a bunch of experiments and activities that you could do to take part in this year's theme of time. There are 6 fun digital activities plus today's live lesson, and for each of these you can earn yourself a digital badge. You can do all of these using your Connected Falkirk iPads, and it's up to you and your teacher how to use them. There aren't any rules. You can do them in groups, by yourself, or you can even try them out at home if you want to. We really hope you enjoy trying them out, and if you scan the QR code on the screen just now, it'll take you to a copy of these activities and instructions that you can access later. There are 7 STEM digital badges available, and you've just gotten your first one, your STEM one today, just for joining this lesson. Well done. So although British Science Week finishes on Monday, you can still do these anytime, so please go ahead and try them out, and then either tag us on Twitter or submit the results on a Google form to get your badge for each. There are lots of other fun activities and experiments that you can complete as a class, and you can find these in the packs on the British Science Week website, which are filled with different ideas for early years, primary and secondary pupils to learn all about STEM. And remember, you don't have to do these in March. These are experiments that you can do anytime throughout the year, and you can also look back at the previous years as well to get lots of other ideas too. So, are we ready to get started? Excellent. So for this today, when we do the live lesson, we're using a tool to gather the responses of everyone that's on the live lesson through a tool called Curipod. Now, what I've done here is I've taken those Curipod slides and I've put them into this presentation, but unfortunately you're not going to be able to join on your iPad to answer them. So I'm going to do some polls and things as I go through, and I'll get you to pause and do them as a class in whatever way works for you. But I've also shared the Curipod with your teachers. So if your teacher feels able to, they can actually set up the Curipod with all of you on it, all of the pupils on it, and it means you can actually do it interactively. So you can vote on the polls, you can put in your responses, which is a really, really nice way to do it. So get your teacher to have a little look at the email or the thing that came out with this in it, and see if they can set up the Curipod. It's quite nice and easy, and as I said, it lets you do all of your responses so that everyone can see them. So when you do join the Curipod, you do put your first name, and then what happens is you get given a fun nickname that will be yours for the whole session. So pause the video here if you are going to use Curipod and get all of your pupils on it ready to go. Okay, so for our starter, we're going to guess what different magnified images might be. So magnified means something that is zoomed in or that we're seeing much closer up and in lots of detail. So it might look quite different from what we'd expect. So this is a zoomed in or magnified image of a needle and a thread. So if you think about what a needle and thread looks like, a needle is really, really tiny, really thin, and at the top of it there's a little hole for you to put the thread through when you're sewing something. Well, this is a zoomed in example of that. So this is a bigger example, a magnified example of what that actually looks like, and you can see that a single thread is actually made up of loads of different fibres bundled together. So I think magnified images are really, really cool, and what we're going to do now it's your turn. We're going to do a quick quiz where you have to guess what the magnified image is of. So what do you think each of these zoomed in pictures are? Now, if you're using Curipod, you can vote on these. If not, you can just vote as a class with hands up, and I'll pause after each one to give you a chance to do that. So our first example, what is this a magnified image of? Is this grass, toothbrush, eyelashes, or a carpet? So pause the video here and decide, and then I'll give you the correct answer. So hopefully you got that correct. It is eyelashes. So that is what your eyelashes look like up close. Okay, what is this a magnified image of? So again, pause the video here and decide whether it's a grasshopper antenna, a camera opening, a fish eye, or a ballpoint pen. Well done to those who got that was a ballpoint pen. Our next one, what is this a magnified image of? Is it a cat's tongue, coral reef, bacteria, or Velcro? Well done to those that got that this is Velcro. So it's the little hooks that allow Velcro to stick together. Next one, what is this a magnified image of? Is it a brain? Is it cabbage leaf? Is it a beach? Or is it a tabletop? This one, although it does look a bit like a brain, is actually a cabbage leaf. And the reason I put beach is if you zoom out of a beach really high up, you might see kind of patterns in the sand, which is why it might have looked like that. But this one is actually a cabbage leaf. Let's try another one. So what is this a magnified image of? Is it potatoes? Is it baker's yeast? Is it sand grains? Or is it dust? Well done to those who got it. It is baker's yeast. So it's the yeast you would use to make things like bread. Perfect. Okay, for our last one, we're going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to show you this zoomed in image and you're going to type what you think it is into Curipod rather than selecting an answer. If you're not using Curipod, you can just discuss this and come up with an answer. So what do you think this is a magnified image of? Okay, let's get a drum roll please, because for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this website and I'm going to zoom out bit by bit by bit till you can see what it is. So drum roll. And if I start to zoom out, you can maybe guess what it is now, or maybe now. If I keep going, I think we might get it by this point. This and this. So it's a mouldy piece of bread. And that is what the main part of our session today is going to be about. It's going to be about mould, so that links into it quite nicely. So, mould is a microbe or microorganism. The world is full of microscopic organisms that we can't see with our human eye. We often need to use things like microscopes, which you can see in this slide here, to be able to see them properly. There are three main types of microbe. Some of them you might have heard of before. So they are viruses, bacteria, and fungi. Now today we are going to be focusing on mould, and mould is a fungus, so it's part of the same family, which includes things like mushrooms that you'll eat and yeast. Now, basically fungus usually feed on dead plant and animal matter, which causes rotting, and that is actually really useful. It helps the environment to recycle nutrients. Yeast is the fungus that helps make bread rise, and fungus also has other benefits like being used to make things like cheese, and it's also used to create antibiotics such as penicillin, which we use to fight infections and diseases. So actually, funguses aren't actually all that bad. We call them fungi if there's more than one, so fungi aren't all that bad. However, sometimes we don't want fungi to be around, so we don't want things like mould on our food. So fungi spread through the air in small little seed-like spores, and when they land, for example, on bread or fruit or other food that we have in our house, then they open and then they grow under the right conditions, which is why you'll find that food gets mouldy after a while. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at mould a little more closely, and as scientists we need to gather some information and figure out what we already know about something before we start our experiment. So let's have a think first with a few questions. Now if you're using Curipod, you can put your answers on for each of these, and again I'll tell you to pause after each one. Pause the video so you can do that. If you're not using Curipod, you can again just discuss these as a class and come up with your answer before moving on. So in our first question, it says, have you ever found mould growing on bread at home? So I just want a yes or a no for this one. Pause the video here, have a quick discussion. I'm thinking most of you probably have found mould growing on bread in your home, and probably on some other food as well. Let's try another one. So where do you keep bread in your house? So come up with a list for everyone in the class. Do you know where you keep bread usually in your house? So I think we'll probably have answers here, like in a bread bin or in a cupboard or in a fridge maybe as well. Some people I know might keep it in the freezer. So there'll be lots of different places, but I think very few people will probably keep it just sitting out in the kitchen, and we'll come back to that in a wee second. Next, I want you to think about the different places that you store food in your house that we've just gone through, and I want you to think, why do you think these places are used? So what is it about them that mean that we probably keep things like bread and other foods there? So for this one, I think your answer is probably going to be things like they're dark or they're cooler, maybe especially in the case of the fridge. So we need to think, why would we need darker or cooler places to keep our food? Well, the reason is that things like mould need moist, so kind of wetness or dampness, and they need warmth to be able to grow a lot. So if you have things in a really warm, moist environment, they're going to grow mould a lot more quickly than if they're in a cool and dark place like a cupboard or like your fridge. Okay, so that's how we slow down mould growing, as we keep them in cool, dark places. But what we're going to do today is we're going to actually try and speed that up a bit, because that is going to tie in to our experiment. So for this experiment, we need to double check first of all that we have all the right equipment that we need. So we're going to test lots of different, what we are going to call conditions for our bread. So for each condition that you are going to test, you are going to need a Ziploc bag, a piece of bread, a label, so this could be a sticky label, a post-it note, or even just a marker pen to draw on the bag. Anything that you can put on your Ziploc bag so that you know which one is which. And you also need some paper towels and a source of water. So if you don't have a sink in your classroom, you're going to need to have basically a little basin or something filled with water for the class. Depending on how much equipment your class has, it might be that every person in your class is investigating a condition each, so you might all have a bit of bread each and all of these each, or you could be doing it in groups. Your teacher's going to let you know just now which one you're going to do. So are you going to test maybe 4 or 5 different conditions, just one per group, or are you going to do one each? Okay, so for this next bit, we would normally do a demonstration, but unfortunately, I don't have the equipment here ready today because this is a pre-recording. So I'm going to talk you through really carefully the instructions, and I need you to listen out. It might be good just now if your teacher might demonstrate these and follow along with them as I tell them what to do, so that you can see exactly what you need to do when you go on to do it yourself. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to get all of that equipment ready that we just spoke about. You also need to know your condition. So what are you going to test your bread with? Are you going to test it with an unwashed hand? Are you going to wipe it on a surface in the classroom? But you need to know what you're doing so that you can write that label. So your label will just have on it what your condition is. So in this example here, I've put dirty hands, but that could be anything. It could be whatever you're testing. Remember, everyone in the class or every group in the class is going to test something different, so you're going to have to make sure that no one's doing the same thing. Next, what you want to do is you want to take your bag in one hand, your Ziploc bag, and you want to take your other hand and you want to push it through from the bottom of the Ziploc bag up, okay? And that's to turn the bag inside out. Now, the problem is you can't just put your hand straight in, because if you do that and then we turn it inside out later, the Ziploc bag isn't going to close anymore. So you need to do it in a bit of a funny way, where you take the bag open and from the bottom push the bag through so that your hand is inside the bag. Okay? The next thing you need to do is you then need to use that hand that's in the bag to pick up the piece of bread. Now, we need to make sure that your bread is still in the packaging at the moment, because if it's not in the packaging, then you're exposing it to lots of different things like mould spores or other kind of nasty like bacteria and viruses and stuff that might be in the air or on a surface. So make sure you're taking the bread from the loaf and you're not picking up off a table or something instead. The other tip I'm going to give at this point is that hopefully your teacher bought some bread that is fresh bread. If it's bread that has preservatives in it, it can take quite a long time for it to grow mould on it, so you might be waiting just a little bit longer. Then what you need to do is you need to then test your condition. So if you're doing unwashed hands, you need to then take your hand, stick it on the bread really gently, and do the same on the other side. If you're testing something else, for example a tabletop, which you can see here, you're going to use your gloved hand to rub the bread gently over the surface. You don't want the bread to break, you just want to gently rub over the top, and you want to test both sides. You want to then put it onto the other side and do the same thing again. Once you're done, you're then going to turn that bag inside out so that the bread's now on the inside. Now you're trying to minimise how much you're touching the bread. Unless you're testing it with dirty hands, every other condition you don't want to touch the bread with your actual hands. You want to just make sure you're touching it with the bag, because that is a lot more sterile. Once it's inside the bag, you then want to add a damp paper towel. So take a paper towel, fold it up, dip it in some water, and then put that into the bag. So put it at the back of the piece of bread. You want to try and make sure it's roughly the same level of dampness for every condition in your class. So you don't want it to be absolutely dripping with water, but you do want that paper towel to be damp. And the reason is we know that the mould likes damp and warm conditions, so it'll grow quicker, the mould on it, if we put a wet paper towel in it. The final thing that you need to do is you need to seal the bag, and you need to add your label onto the top of it, because we need to know which piece of bread is which, and the bag must be sealed, okay? It has to be sealed. We need to make sure that none of that mould that grows gets out into the environment. For teachers, we'd like you to set up a control. So a control is something that we do to make sure that it's what we're testing that is causing the effect. So we use it as a comparison. What we would want to do is make sure that we have a bit of bread in a plastic or sealed bag with a damp paper towel in it, but that hasn't been touched on anything. Because we know that bread, after a while, even if it's in the packet from the company, it'll eventually grow mould anyway. So we want to be able to compare how much mould would it grow if it hasn't touched anything to if it has touched something in the classroom, and that's what we are testing. So make sure that the teacher has also set up a control. Perfect. So that is how we're going to do our experiment. Now let's quickly talk about experimental write-ups. In a write-up, we always have an aim. So the aim is what we're trying to find out. So in this experiment, we're trying to investigate which surface in the classroom causes mould to either grow faster or causes more mould to grow on the bread. When we do an experiment, we always change one thing. So our independent variable is the thing that we change. And in this experiment, it's the surface that it touches. We want to try and just change that. There are so many different surfaces that you could test with your bread. One of them would be a dirty hand that hasn't been washed. I want you to think just now about, can you think of any other surfaces in your classroom that we could test? So this is where you want to take the chance to come up with as many as you possibly can, so that everyone in your class or every group in your class has a different one that they can test. So pause the video here, or if you're using the Curipod, put your answers into that. Think about how many different places you could test in your classroom, or with your hands, for example. Okay, so we're probably going to come up with quite a lot of things here. It can pretty much be anywhere in your classroom, but in terms of your hands, you could do dirty hands, you could do washed hands, so washed with soap, or you could do washed with hand gel, any of those, to see if there's a difference between them. That might be quite a good experiment as well. We'll go back in a wee minute to things that you're not allowed to test, but we'll come back to that soon. What we then also do when we're writing a lab report is we think about how we're going to measure our results. So that's our dependent variable. So we're going to measure how quickly the mould grows and how much mould grows, but we're going to come back to this a little bit later on. The final thing we need to think about is what we're going to control. So what do we need to keep the same? So if we're changing the surface that the bread touches, what other things do we need to keep the same across all the classes' experiments? So you're doing maybe a different condition from the person next to you or from the group across from you. Everything else has to be the same apart from what the bread touches. So can you think of what those things might be that you have to keep the same? So again, we're going to pause here, have a think about what would we need to keep the same. So here are some ideas that we came up with. So things like the size of the bread would need to be the same as much as possible. So you don't want to have like a massive loaf and then a tiny little loaf. The type of bread is important. So as I said earlier, if it's got preservatives in it, then it's going to be a lot slower at growing mould than the ones that don't have preservatives or that are fresh. The length of time you leave them for, so we're going to set these up today. You want to make sure that every group has this set up for the same amount of time. You don't want to be doing results for one group in a day's time and another group in a couple of weeks' time. Dampness of the paper towel if possible, so making sure it's roughly the same dampness. The size of the paper towels, making sure it's not one massive wad of paper towels versus a tiny amount. Things like the location where they're kept. So remember, each location in your classroom, whether it's in a cupboard or on a window or on a wall, taped to a wall, or in your trays, whatever condition you put them into or place you put them into is going to have a different amount of light and is also going to have different levels of warmth. So we want to make sure that those are the same. So you put all of your conditions together at the end and they all get kept in the same place. The final one is that all bags must be sealed. Okay, so we're talked about that a little bit before, but that's really, really important. The bags have to be sealed and they have to stay sealed. They cannot be opened again once you've set up your experiment today. Now, you might have come up with things other than that, and that is brilliant. Try and keep as many things the same as you possibly can. So, some rules for these experiments. There's a few rules we need to make sure that everyone follows to be safe and to make sure our experiment works. The first is that we cannot test bodily fluids. So when you decide what you're going to test for each condition, we can't use things like spit or snot, those types of things. It's just not allowed when we're doing microbiology. Second, you need to try your absolute best not to touch your slice of bread with anything apart from the bag it'll go into and your condition. So whether that's dirty hands, your table, anything like that, because otherwise you won't get the right results. If it's touched other things, you can't tell that it's because of the thing that you tested that's causing the mould to grow. Finally, you can only test areas in your classroom. You must stay in the room at all times. You're not allowed to go elsewhere. And this is really important because we're not allowed to test things like bathrooms. Okay, so it has to be stuff that's in your classroom. So here's a reminder of your instructions again. Remember all the little tips that we gave you in the demonstration or when we talked through it earlier. Everyone in your class or every group in the class should be testing a different condition to give you lots of things to look at over the next few weeks. At the moment, you'll want to pause the video for 5 or 10 minutes to get this all set up. You want to follow those instructions really carefully that are on the screen. When you're ready, come back and play the video again, and then we'll go on with the next part. However, I just want to point out we've got a little extension activity if you are finished. So we know that some groups might go a little bit quicker than others. If you have on Curipod, there is a drawing game at the moment. So it'll be draw a cool superhero version of yourself fighting against a giant piece of mouldy bread. So it's a little brain break for when you're finished your experiment. Now, if you're using Curipod with your teacher, you'll be able to draw these and you'll be able to vote on whose is the best at the end. If you're not using Curipod, you can just do this on your iPad on notes, or you could do it on a piece of paper. It's completely up to you, but it's just giving you something to do if you're finished setting up the experiment. So pause the video here and play again when everyone has their conditions set up. Excellent, well done everyone. So you've now successfully set up your mouldy bread experiment if all of your conditions in the class have a Ziploc bag with a piece of bread in it, a damp paper towel, clearly labelled and the bag fully sealed. Teachers, can you please double check this has been done? You'll now leave all of these in the same place over the next few weeks and monitor the results and see which one grows the most mould and which one does so the quickest. You can keep these in lots of different places around your classroom. It can go in a cupboard, they can go on the wall, so you can see them. You can put them on the window as well, but just be careful as the water might evaporate quite a lot if the bags aren't sealed properly, and they might become quite dry. Although it will give them warmth, which might speed up the reaction, it might be also that it loses its dampness. So be careful where you put them. It's completely up to you, but just make sure they are all in the same place. One thing that we want to point out just now is that these bags should never ever be opened again. The mould that's going to grow inside them will produce spores and those aren't good for you. So to be safe when you're gathering the results, the bread must stay in the bag fully closed. After a week or so, when you're finished gathering your results, your teacher must put all the bags directly in another bin bag and throw them out. Perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we're going to gather our results. So as we mentioned before, your dependent variable is what you measure. And what we are going to measure is how quickly they grow mould, but also how much mould they grow as well. So to do this, we're going to use Keynote on your iPad and some of the other features that are available on the iPad as well. So things like using magnifier, using measure, using markup, and then also talking about descriptions as well. So I've created a mouldy bread template that you can access by scanning the QR code on this slide. Once you've scanned the QR code, I'm going to show you how to download it onto your device, and then I'll show you how to edit it and add all of your results into it. So if you pause the video here and scan the QR code, and then I'll show you how to go from there. Okay, when you scan that QR code, it is going to open a Google Drive. So if you've got Google Drive already downloaded as an app on your device, it'll open it within the app. If you don't, it's going to open it within Safari. What you should see is something that looks like this, and what we have here is the Keynote file. You want to tap the 3 little dots on the right hand side of that file, and we want to tap the button that says download. It'll then scan it for viruses and it'll download it onto your device. So it's going to come up with a wee thing saying view or download. We want to tap download. And on the top right hand side, you'll have just seen there, but it's quite quick, that the little arrow pointing down the way with the circle is basically filled up, as in it's downloaded it. So you're going to tap that at the top right hand side, and then you're going to tap Mouldy Bread Diary, and it's going to open in Keynote. Pause here until everyone in the class has got that open. Okay, once it's open, you can see that I've given you 7 pages to your diary and they are all exactly the same. Now, a couple of points on this. I've only given you 7 pages, so you could do one a day, but it might take more than a week for your bread to grow mould. So if you want to do one a week, that's fine. I've obviously put day here, but you can change that. Or you can add more slides. So to add a slide, you're just going to tap one of the ones that's already available, and you're going to tap duplicate, and that's just going to create another one there. So you can just keep doing that and adding as many as you want. Now, what you're going to do when you go to fill this out every day or every week is you're basically going to fill in the day and the condition. So what day is it since you set up the experiment, and what condition were you testing? So was it dirty hands? Was it the tabletop? Was it the chair? Was your pencil? Whatever it was, you add your condition into there. So you can type for it if you want to. So you can add a text box and type it in, or you can draw on the top if you've got a stylus or you want to use your finger. That's absolutely fine as well. For the other parts of it, we've got a few different things we can do. So the first thing it's asked you to do is use Magnify on the iPad to take a close-up photo of your mould, and then tap the plus button and add the picture here. So let's do that together as a little practice. So I'm going to come out of this and I'm going to find the magnifier option in my iPad. So if you don't know where it is, you can drag down with one finger on the screen and start to type in magnify. And it'll come up with magnifier, which is a little magnifying glass with a plus on it. If you tap that and open it, it's going to open the camera on your device, okay? And I don't have an example of mouldy bread here at the moment, but let's pretend this is my piece of bread, and let's pretend there is some mould on it, okay, like this part here. What I can then do is I can use the bit on the left, the slider, to zoom in, like that. And when I get it to a point where I think it's zoomed in enough, this is testing how steady your hands are, you can then tap the circle, the white circle, and that's going to take a photo, okay? Once you've got a photo of the mould on your bread or whatever, you're going to tap the little square with the arrow pointing up at the top, and then you're going to tap Save Image, and that's going to save the image to your camera roll. Then I can go back into the Keynote, and what I can do is I can tap that plus button, which is at the bottom right of the picture, tap Choose Photo or Video, and then when it opens, just select my last photo, which will be the one from the magnifier, and that'll add it in there. The next thing it's asked us to do is use Measure on the iPad to measure the size of the mould, and then again add the picture. So this time we're going to use Measure. So again, if you haven't used it before or you can't find it, just start typing in Measure, and it'll come up. It looks like a little kind of ruler. It's black, yellow and white. If you tap on this, it's going to open the Measure app on your iPad. Now, the first thing it'll ask you to do is move your iPad so that it can calibrate and you can get the little dot in the middle of the screen. Now, let's pretend this whole thing is mould. If I want to add a point, I just take that point to the edge of the mould. I tap the plus button. I drag, using my iPad, across to the other end of the mould, and then I tap again. And if I want to take a photo of that, I then tap the button above it, which is the one with the white circle. That's going to automatically save to my camera roll, and then I can do the exact same thing I did before. So I can go into my Keynote, I can tap the plus button, tap Choose Photo or Video, and add in that photo there. Then there's a few other things you can do. You can take a photo of your bread, just the whole thing as it is, because obviously we've measured it and we've magnified it, but you might just want one of the actual whole bit of bread itself. You can do that within the app or within Keynotes. So tap the plus on the bottom right, tap, instead of choose photo or video, we've not taken the photo yet, so we can tap take photo or video, and it's going to open my camera and I can take that photo, and then I just tap use photo. Okay. Other things that you can do is you can sketch as well. So if you've got a stylus, you can add a drawing, or you can just add a drawing anyway, just using your finger. But what I can do here is I can use the different things that are available to me here, and I can draw what's happening at the moment on my bread. So I'll draw my bread. I might use this. My bread's a kind of yellowy colour. Now this is a terrible drawing, you'll do a much better job than I will. And then let's say my mould is green, so I can draw where I found mould on that bit of bread. Maybe you found some black mould as well. So you can do a little sketch here, and when you're done, just tap done on the top left hand side. And the other thing you can do is you can describe what you can see. So you can either type here by tapping, double tapping brings up your keyboard, and you can type in what you can see. So there are 3 patches of mould. One is green and the other 2 are black and furry. Let's see. Now obviously that's run over a bit, so I can drag that in. The other thing that you can do if you don't want to type, or if you're maybe in like P3, P4, or you just prefer to do it this way, is you can actually add media instead. So you can add things like a video, or you can add audio. So if I tap the little picture at the top, I can say here record audio, and it's going to bring up this, and I can tap at the bottom and say that I think there was 3 patches of mould on my bread, one is green and the other 2 are black and furry. Stop. Once I've said it, I can then tap insert, and that inserts my little audio file there as well. So you can actually describe each day, do a little diary, audio diary of what you can see on your bread as well. So as you can see, it's really simple. There's lots of different things that you can do to see what's happening with your bread. So you can use that magnify option to zoom in on the mould. You can measure the mould as well to see how much of an area of your bread is covered by it. You can sketch it. You can take a photo of your bread. You can describe it using text or using audio description. It's completely up to you. And then what you'll do is each day or every few days, you can do a new page in your Keynote diary and keep adding some more into there. So I think that'll be quite good fun. You can then compare your results to the rest of the class. You can see which one grew mould faster, so which one was in an earlier day, did it suddenly have mould on it, but you can also see by the end of it which one had the most mould as well. Perfect. Okay, so that's just a quick thing showing you how that you can do this. I'm just going to go back onto my slides and we'll carry on from there. So we'll now need to talk about hypotheses. So we also need to think about what our hypothesis is going to be. A hypothesis is what do we think is going to happen. So when we set up an experiment, we usually think, what do I think the results are going to be? So which condition that your class set up do you think is going to have the most mould on it by the end of the week or the end of the few weeks that you test this for? So if you're using Curipod, you can vote on that just now. If you're not, you can just have a discussion in your class and pause the video here. So I'm guessing we might have had answers like dirty hands or tabletop or pencils, because they get touched quite a lot. That all sounds good to me. Let us now think about which condition out of the ones that your class tested do you think will lead to the least mould growth. So again, if you're using Curipod, you can use it for this. If not, then just have a discussion as your class. Perfect. So now what we try and do is we try and test that hypothesis. So we've set up our experiment, and what you'll find in a few weeks is you'll be able to answer those questions. You'll be able to see where your hypothesis is correct. Did you know what one was going to grow the most mould or the least mould? And you'll see that by looking at your results. Well done. Perfect. We can't wait to see what you find out. Now, before you go, if you've ever been to one of my live lessons before, you'll know that I love to give you a little extension task. This activity we've done today fits in really well with one of the primary British Science Week official activities, which asks you to learn about mould and create an advert campaign all about the dangers of mould and how to keep your home free from mould. You can follow the link here to the official activity, and I'd suggest using clips on your iPad to create your own little adverts now that you know lots about mould as well. We really hope that you've enjoyed watching this, and we would like some feedback because this allows to do more of these things in the future. So if you are able, you could fill in this feedback form. So I've got one for teachers and one for pupils, and let us know how you found this recording and whether it was useful and whether you want more of these in the future. Thank you so much for advance for this, because it really does help make sure that we can offer these more often if it's something that's useful. Now, I really hope you've had a fun sciencey morning or afternoon whenever you've watched this recording. I know that I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to make this for you, and I'd like to thank our two special guests, Roz and Cameron, who did help to make these slides and make this live lesson for you, although they couldn't be here for the pre-recording. We're really excited to see any pictures that you've taken of you doing this experiment over the morning or afternoon that you're doing it. So our Twitter accounts are on the screen just now, so please encourage your teachers to share anything with us. Please also go away and try those other British Science Week activities and try and get those other badges, because now you've got your STEM badge, you'll obviously want to try and get your other 6. Thank you so much for watching. We really hope you enjoy British Science Week 2024 and you enjoy this activity, and we hope you get to try more of them out over the next wee while. Thank you for your time. Remember to keep in touch. Have a lovely day.